Hello everyone, welcome back to The Dark One. I know that many of you use these videos to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I thought it would be fun if everyone left a comment letting me know where you're listening from in the world. If you're enjoying the case, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, get comfy, relax, and let's begin. They summoned me in the dead of winter. It was the season of the long night in the Antarctic, when the sun refused to rise and I had no idea what to expect. Even the instructions were vague, almost cryptic, except for one clear detail. I was to report to a research outpost near the pole, isolated in the loneliest place on Earth. As my plane touched down, a storm whipped across the ice, the wind howling and rattling the metal of the aircraft. The sky was bathed in a bruised violet, and the lights of the base ahead of us blinked like tiny pale stars. I felt an oppressive weight settle on my chest as soon as I stepped onto the icy ground. A young soldier, half of his face hidden by a hood and goggles, approached. He seemed relieved to see the collar of a priest under my thick wool coat. A good feeling, even though I was clearly out of place. "Father Martin?" he asked, his voice muffled by the scarf wrapped around his mouth. I nodded, clutching my bag tightly, feeling the biting wind seep through every layer. "That's me, and you are?" "Corporal Haynes, sir," he replied, standing at attention. "They were waiting for you. They want you to come with me to the briefing room immediately." I followed him, casting a last glance at the endless expanse of ice, broken only by low hills and jagged cliffs in the distance. Here, there was nothing but emptiness and the howling wind. The silence was unlike anything I had ever experienced, vast and deep, but with something unsettling. I pushed the feeling aside when we reached the entrance. Inside the outpost, metal walls, harsh fluorescent lighting, and soldiers in somber green coats awaited me, eyeing me with a look I couldn't quite place. We walked through narrow corridors until Haynes stopped in front of a heavy steel door. He knocked, and a voice inside told us to enter. The door opened with a creak, revealing an older man in a neat uniform who radiated an authority that clearly identified him as a superior. He stood up as I entered and nodded briefly. "Father Martin," he said, extending his hand. "Colonel Beckett, thank you for coming." I shook his hand and felt how firm his grip was. "I haven't been given many details, Colonel, only that I'm needed here for something unusual." He exchanged a glance with Haynes, and I could see a fleeting look of unease cross his expression. "Yes, we apologize for the secrecy. There are certain elements of this mission that we'd rather left unspoken until you arrived." I raised an eyebrow, feeling the knot in my stomach tighten. "Continue." He hesitated just a moment before continuing. "There's a formation nearby, a cave. We discovered it while mapping this area, strange, huge, almost like a natural monument. We've had personnel going in and out, but it's hard to explain." Beckett's gaze rested on me, and in his eyes I saw something that sent a shiver down my spine. Fear. "I think it's best if you see for yourself," he said softly. The ride out was bleak. The wind had picked up, tugging at the sides of the vehicle as if trying to get in. Outside, the snow and ice stretched endlessly, interrupted only by rugged, leaden rocks that stood out like the backbone of a long, dead giant. Corporal Haynes drove in silence, his hands clenched tightly around the steering wheel. I sat in the back with two soldiers, neither of them saying a word. They stared stiffly and tensely out of the windows, as if the land outside was attacking us. Colonel Beckett had given me little information before sending us off. "The cave, there is something there," he had said, staring at a map on his desk, although I sensed that he wasn't really looking at it. We had a team check it out when we first found it, but they didn't get far before they started acting strange. One of them even... He broke off, and I had seen a shadow cross his face. What do you mean, acting strange? I pressed the point, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. He looked up at me, his face impassive, but his eyes betrayed something almost like fear. Degradation, paranoia, hallucinations. One man said he felt like he was being watched. Another claimed to hear whispering voices. They didn't get far into the cave before I pulled them out. It's as if the place has a presence. He cleared his throat. I don't believe in the supernatural much, but my men do. They'll feel better having a priest with them. As we approached the ominous formation, his words ran through my mind. There is something very special about it. The soldiers and I remained silent until the vehicle finally stopped. Haynes turned off the engine, and the sudden silence was so intense that it was almost violent. We stepped out into the biting wind, and there, a few meters away, it stood. A massive stone formation jutting out of the ice, half buried, its shape somber and rugged against the pale landscape. It must have been about 45 meters high and 15 meters wide. The entrance itself was a wide, black opening, rounded at the edges and framed by jagged rocks. The snow seemed to pile up around the cave in unnatural drifts, almost as if the cave had caused the ice to crack and shift at strange, unnatural angles. One of the soldiers, Private Mills, was standing next to me in a low voice. "Doesn't look right, does it?" "No," I murmured, swallowing. "It doesn't." Sergeant Davis, the tallest of the group, tried to break the tension with a forced chuckle. "It's just a weird rock formation," he muttered, not taking his eyes off the entrance. Nothing more. I shot him a glance and studied the tension around his mouth, the way he gripped his rifle. They were all carrying their weapons as if they expected something to jump out of the darkness at any moment. "Look," Davis continued in a gruff tone as he looked at me. "I don't know if you really believe in this priest stuff, but just stay close to me, okay?" I nodded and smiled, what I hoped was a reassuring smile. "I'll stay close to you." The men visibly relaxed, but only just. Together we approached the cave entrance. Every step crunched under us, while the wind muffled all other sounds. The entrance grew larger the closer we got, and my skin tingled with that inexplicable feeling of being watched, as if there was something behind those pitch-black pools of emptiness, watching us from within. Private Mills stopped suddenly and looked at the ground near the opening. "Look," he whispered, and we followed his gaze. Traces, naked footprints in the snow leading to the cave entrance and disappearing there. The size of the prints suggested that they were not from an adult man, but rather from a child. "Who?" Corporal Haynes began, his voice barely audible. "No one's been here recently," Sergeant Davis murmured, his voice hoarse. "And no one walks around barefoot in this weather. You'd be dead within minutes." Instinctively, I reached for the small silver crucifix I wore around my neck. Beckett's words echoed in my mind. There is something, a presence. Without another word, we walked forward and entered the gaping mouth of the cave. The light behind us quickly faded and warm. Moist air seemed to seep from the walls, filling the space with an almost suffocating blanket. The beams of our flashlight swept across the cave walls, casting long, shifting shadows that seemed to ripple with the flicker of movement. Inside, the air carried a faint, earthy odor that reminded me of wet metal. Something about it made my skin tingle, though I couldn't say why. "Father," Sergeant Davis said in a rough but quiet voice. He shifted back and forth on his feet, avoiding eye contact with me. "Before we go any deeper, maybe you could, say something." For luck, the other soldiers nodded, their faces tense and alert in the dim light. Despite their rifles and years of training, they looked like nervous little boys. I nodded, gathered my words, and felt the cold seep deeper into my skin. I raised a hand and ran my fingers over the crucifix hanging from my neck. Almighty God, we place ourselves in your hands as we pass through this place. Protect us, guide us, and let your light be our way. Protect these men, keep them steadfast, and give us the courage to survive this journey. As I spoke, a faint, distant sound echoed through the cave. It was weak, just a whisper, but unmistakably unnatural. A slow, grinding rumble that reverberated through the walls. It was as if the stone were shifting and groaning under some unimaginable force. It remained in the background and grew louder and quieter like a muffled protest. The soldiers exchanged worried glances and gripped their weapons a little tighter. Mills spoke up, his voice quiet. You heard that, right? I mean, it wasn't just me. Probably just the earth settling, Davis offered, though his voice trembled. These caves are old. It could be shifting ice, rocks settling, something like that. Yeah, Corporal Haynes murmured. Just rocks. I lowered my hand and tucked the cross back into my jacket. We'll be fine, I said, though even to my own ears my words sounded hollow. We continued on, single file, deeper into the cave's dark maw. The walls narrowed and began to slope downward. The floor felt oddly smooth, not jagged or broken as one would expect. Instead, it was a continuous, winding path that curved gently downward like the inside of a strange, winding funnel. The rock itself shimmered when the flashlight hit it. Not with a mineral shimmer, but with something moist, as if it were coated with a thin film of syrupy liquid. In addition, the walls emitted a subtle warmth that was far warmer than the frozen air outside. Feels different in here, right? Mills murmured, letting his gaze sweep over the tunnel walls. I mean, shouldn't it still be cold? Davis scoffed, though his expression remained tense. Just keep moving, Mills. It's probably a geothermal fissure or something, heat trapped in the earth. But he, too, kept looking around with clenched teeth. As we descended further, the path narrowed, forcing us to huddle together as the ceiling got lower and lower. The walls seemed to bulge inwards, and the floor began to slope even more steeply. The air became heavier, thick with a smell that was difficult to define. A mixture of damp earth and something almost rotten. Every few steps, the low rumble of crunching echoed in the background, humming like a low rumbling. There were no obvious signs of danger, but a growing unease swirled in my stomach. The walls seemed to pulsate slightly the longer you looked. I reached out and touched the stone as we passed. It felt oddly soft and smooth under my gloved fingertips. I withdrew my hand and quickly wiped the liquid on my coat, but the feeling remained. Feels strange, doesn't it? Mills whispered in a barely audible voice. As if we shouldn't be here. Hush, Haynes hissed, though his voice was strained. He glanced at me, his eyes pleading. Father, do you feel something strange here? I took a deep breath to steady myself. There is something here, I murmured. But let's keep our minds on our task. They nodded, but I saw their apprehension growing. We walked on in silence, each step echoing through the hollow passageway, a relentless descent into the unknown. And behind us the cave walls groaned as if they were watching us and waiting with patient longing. As we descended further, the silence between us became more and more oppressive, and the walls seemed to close in more and more. Further ahead, much deeper in the cave, a soft throbbing could be heard, a slow, steady vibration that seemed to echo in my head. I couldn't place it. Maybe the sound of bubbling water pulsating from somewhere deep inside. But this didn't feel right. Do you guys feel that too? Mills asked in a hoarse voice. He had been quiet for a while, but now his face was pale and he kept glancing over his shoulder every few seconds. Despite the cold in the tunnel, sweat glistened on his forehead. Just keep moving, Sergeant Davis barked, although his voice was barely audible with his own apprehension. There's nothing here but rocks. Stay on the ground. But Mills seemed to barely hear him. He stopped, his breathing uneven and his gaze fixed on an invisible point in front of him. I reached out and put my hand on his shoulder, feeling his muscles tense under my grip. Mills, I said softly, stay with us. He blinked and looked at me with wide, frightened eyes. I don't think I should be here, Father. I feel like something is looking at me, something I left behind. His hand trembled as he touched his forehead and murmured to himself, I don't know why how could I? What do you see? I asked, although I felt queasy as I sensed the burden of horror he was carrying. It's her, he whispered, his voice trembling. My little girl, she's looking at me, but her face. His hand shot to his mouth, suppressing a gasp. His eyes widened, his pupils dilated, as if he were experiencing something unspeakable in the shadows. I could see the fear intensifying in him, his gaze wild and darting this way and that, as if he were tracking an invisible presence in the air. She's just standing there, he whispered in a broken voice, but something's wrong. Her skin is so pale as if she'd been dead for days. Her eyes are, oh God, no, no, no. Private, Davis shouted, this time louder. Pull yourself together. But Mills just whimpered, and his body trembled as if gripped by fever. She's asking me why I left her alone. She's asking why I wasn't there for her when she was sick. Honey, I was in the field. I tried, but... His voice trailed off, his eyes widening in panic as if he was looking deeper into the shadows. He swayed on his feet, his breathing was erratic, and in that moment I saw something break in him, something primal and frightened. His gaze turned inward, and I felt a shudder of fear run through me as he spoke again. She wants me to end it, to end everything. His voice had taken on an eerie, hollow sound. She says I have to carve her back into me, to feel what she felt, to make up for what I've done. Mills! I grabbed him by the shoulder, but his skin was clammy, unresponsive. His mind trapped somewhere I couldn't reach it. Whatever you're seeing isn't real. You're here with us. Don't let it take you. But he didn't listen. His hand slid to his belt, where a hunting knife glimmered faintly in the weak light. His face contorted into a terrible, pain-filled grimace, as if he were caught between agony and the sick, twisted desire to give in. She says it's the only way, he murmured. If I just cut deep enough, I can take her place. Maybe then. The pounding around us grew louder, pulsing to the rhythm of his words. It reverberated through the walls, an eerie vibration that seemed to pulse with his heartbeat and drove his breath into shallow gasps. I could feel it now, a low hum under my skin, as if something in the depths of the earth was answering, reaching for him with invisible fingers and drawing him closer to the darkness within. Mills, don't, Haynes said, his voice barely more than a whisper, fear choking his words. You're not alone, okay? Whatever you're seeing, it's not real. It's the cave. It's playing tricks on you. Don't listen to it. But Mills' expression remained rigid, a terrible mixture of sorrow and resignation, his eyes lost in the horror that only he could see. He clutched the knife tighter and his gaze wandered from one of us to the other. as if we were strangers. Something malevolent flickered behind his eyes, a darkness that took root and wrapped itself around him. "She wants me to take you all with me," he said softly, his eyes empty and cold. "She says, we all deserve it." He raised the knife, and I saw the slight tremor in his hand as he pointed it at his own throat, his gaze turning inward again, lost in his private nightmare. Without hesitation, I grabbed Mill's arm, my fingers closing around his wrist to stop him from raising the blade any higher. I could feel his body shaking violently under my grip, his muscles tensing as if he were in some kind of dark trance. His eyes were wild, rimmed with desperation and need, fixed on some terrible vision that eluded mine. "Father, help me," he whispered, but his plea was swallowed by the cavern walls, and around us the pulsing sound only fueled him more. I pulled Mills closer, feeling the tremors ripple through his body as he clutched the knife that was pointed at his own throat. His eyes were fixed and unfocused. He mumbled to himself, one desperate sentence after another. "Father, please," he croaked, his voice barely his own. "She's calling me. She says I must—" "No," I interrupted him firmly, though I felt the bitterness of sad inadequacy seep into my soul. I took a deep breath and searched for words that I prayed would have power. "Almighty God, Lord of hosts," I began in a quiet but determined voice, "drive this darkness from his mind. Free him from this evil." Mills jerked violently as I spoke, his eyes rolling back for a moment before he clutched his head in shuddering. His hand dropped the knife and he began to curl up, his face wet with sweat. But as I continued the prayer, his features softened, the manic glow in his eyes dimmed, replaced by something fragile, barely holding together. "Holy Father, I ask for your light in this place of shadow. I ask for your strength to guide this man, for your mercy to protect him. Protect him from this darkness, hold him tight in your grace, deliver him from evil." The words poured out of me, fervent and desperate, and I felt the walls themselves recoil at the sound. The throbbing reverberated deeper within us, louder, sharper, each beat shuddering through the ground beneath us, almost in protest. Mills winced, his face contorting, his mouth opening and closing as if he were struggling to speak. But his eyes remained ghostly, his lips moving silently as if wrestling with voices only he could hear. "Father," he gasped, his voice thick with fear. It's still here. I can feel it, scratching inside me. It's angry, so angry." I clutched his shoulder tighter, refusing to let go. "I know, but you're stronger than it is. Listen to my voice, not to its lies. You're still here, with us, with me." The cave seemed to breathe around us, a low groan vibrating through the walls as if we had disturbed something that had been dormant for a long time. A weak, putrid wind arose and carried the sharp, acrid smell of sulfur and death with it. I felt the air contract and press down on us, as if the stone disapproved of my prayer. "Do you hear that?" Davis murmured softly. He looked along the passage where the walls narrowed. His eyes grew distant, his head tilted slightly, as if he were listening to some kind of sweet song. Haynes stared, spellbound, his own eyes glassy and unfocused. "It's beautiful," he murmured. "Do you see it, Davis?" "The light?" Davis nodded slowly, a strange smile crossing his face. "Yes, it's calling us. Down there, it's—" "Wait," I said sharply. But they ignored me and stepped forward in lockstep, almost as if they were sleepwalking. I held my hand out to Mills, who had begun to tremble violently, and looked with mounting panic at Davis and Haynes. "No," he croaked in a hoarse voice. They can't go down there. Don't let them. Davis, Haynes, I shouted. But they did not turn back, they did not even notice me. They went deeper into the tunnel, following an invisible beacon, their steps steady and unwavering. Mills clung to my hand, his voice desperate. "They're going in, Father. They're going right in." A cold shiver ran down my spine as I watched the two soldiers, who disappeared into the shadows with mechanical calm. I could hear them talking quietly to each other. "Do you see it?" Davis asked with a strange mixture of reverence and devotion. "It's so warm. I can feel it, like a heartbeat." "Yes," Haynes replied in an equally entranced tone. It's been waiting for us, hasn't it? All this time." "Father, please," Mills whispered, his face contorted with a cold sweat. "Don't let them go in any deeper. It's feeding on them. It's drawing them in." I squeezed his shoulder and felt his pulse racing under my hand, erratic and panicked. "Stay with me, Mills. Hold on to your faith and your strength. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." But as I looked down the dark tunnel, the dim light of Davis and Haynes' flashlights faded into the depths. Mills grabbed my arm, his eyes wild and wide, but somehow steady, as if he had found one last shred of strength in him. "Father," he croaked, pulling me close, you have to go. You have to find them and bring them back." I shook my head, reluctant to leave him behind. "Mills, I can't just leave you here. We're going together." He struggled for a pained smile. "No, you have to go without me. I'll be fine. I can hold my own here," he said, looking into the distance, a shadow of uncertainty flitting across his face. "I'll survive, but they won't if you don't find them." I hesitated, feeling fear spread in my stomach, but his grip on my arm was firm, his gaze insistent. He was right. With every second we stayed here, the others were plunged deeper into the nightmare that lay ahead of them. I nodded to him, murmured a quick prayer, and left him curled up in the flickering half-light as I ventured further into the cave. The narrow path snaked downward, deeper than I would have thought possible. The walls closed in, damp and filled with terrible warmth. I quickened my pace and called their names, but only my own voice echoed back, swallowed by the oppressive darkness. Just as panic began to take hold of my chest, I caught a flickering movement in front of me. A small, pale figure emerged from the shadows. It was a child, barefoot and thin, with snow-white skin and hair that shimmered like gold. He couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old, and he was wearing an oversized white shirt. His eyes had a strange glow, an unsettling mixture of innocence and wisdom that was completely inappropriate for someone his age. He looked up at me and smiled weakly, a smile that was warm and inviting but somehow also false. "Hello, Father," he said softly, his voice lilting, almost musical. "You're looking for your friends, aren't you? But it's too late. They're leaving." A cold stab of fear pierced my chest. "What do you mean? Where are they?" The child's smile widened, his eyes darkening with something almost playful. "They got lost. They were scared, Father. They wanted something to hold on to, but you abandoned them. Just like you abandoned Mills." His words twisted inside me, an accusation that cut deep. "Mills wanted me to continue," I said, my voice slightly trembling. "But he asked because he knew you wanted to leave him," the child replied in a gentle, imploring voice. "Mills wanted comfort, Father. He wanted someone to stay by his side to carry him through the fear. You left him alone, and now he's found a way out." I staggered as I realized with horror what he meant. "You're lying. Mills is fine." The child tilted his head, his expression both compassionate and eerily amused. "You'll see. You left him for dead, and now he's gone. He's not the first you've left behind, is he, Father?" I gritted my teeth and fought the urge to retreat. The child's words struck me deeply, touching wounds I didn't know were there, wounds I thought I had forgotten. "You have sacrificed a lot, haven't you?" the child continued, his voice now soft and inviting. "A life of loneliness. The vows you have taken, the vow of chastity, the vow to remain alone in the name of God. No wife, no children. A man giving everything just to get nothing in return." His words pierced me, each one with a dark familiarity. I had spent countless nights wrestling with this emptiness, praying for strength and trying to fill a hole I could never speak aloud about. "You deserve peace, Father," the child whispered, stepping closer. "You have served enough. God sees your suffering. He wants you to rest. He wants you to be free, to find comfort. If you let go, if you just let go, He will welcome you with open arms, as a martyr, as a true saint." He reached for my hand, his touch unnaturally cold. "If you quit now, God will still love you. He will forgive you, and you will never be alone again." My heart pounded, and I felt the heaviness of his words pressing down on me, filling me with a strange, almost seductive numbness. The endless years of service, sacrifice, and feeling adrift in a world that I could only observe from the outside. All of this loomed before me, magnified by his gaze. The child smiled, his expression painfully beautiful and uncanny, his eyes glowing in that unnatural light. "Be comforted, Father," he murmured. "There is peace waiting for you if you will but reach for it." I stared down at him, my hand trembling in his icy grip. The pulsing throb in the wall seemed to synchronize with my own heartbeat, a steady, unrelenting rhythm that urged me to give in, to find the release he promised. The urge to surrender, to let go, tugged at me, tempting me with a strong, honeyed sweetness. My hand, still caught in the child's cold grip, trembled. I felt his promises sink into me, filling every void, every forgotten pain, each whispered with a gentle cruelty that tempted me to surrender. But deep inside, something resisted, an ember that could not be extinguished. I slowly reached into my pocket and felt the familiar weight of my gun. My rosary. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath to calm myself. I clasped the first bead with my fingers and began to pray, my voice a murmur under the oppressive presence. "Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you." The child's face darkened, his smile fading as he looked at me. "Father," he said in a gentle voice, with a hint of warning in his tone, "you're clinging to something that can't help you here. These words, they're meaningless. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus." A slight twitch flickered across his expression, and his grip on my hand tightened painfully. "You don't have to do this, Father," he hissed, his voice turning to a venomous mutter. "You're wasting your time. God won't hear you here, and she doesn't care. Pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death." The boy's face began to contort, his soft features stretching and warping, his skin turning from pale to a deadly yellow. His eyes darkened, becoming almost cave-like and swallowing up any semblance of humanity. His childlike limbs grew long, thin, and bony, and his small hands grew into long, claw-like fingers. The creature's mouth twisted into an obscene grin, revealing sharp, uneven teeth that glistened wet in the dim light. I stumbled back and pressed the rosary to my chest as the creature stood before me, now a hideous, twisted apparition of what it had once been. "You think you can resist me?" The voice that came out of his mouth was no longer that of a child. It was a throaty, rumbling growl, imbued with a power that made the air tremble. The walls seemed to tremble in response to his words, as if they too were part of him, a living, breathing extension of his will. "You stand in my flesh, priest," he sneered, gesturing at the walls around us. "You walk through my veins, feel my breath in the stones, hear my pulse in the darkness. This is my body, and you are nothing but a mouthful of it." The walls seemed to close in around me, their surfaces rippling subtly and taking on a sickening, organic quality. The faint, pulsating sound echoed louder, its rhythm a slow, hungry beat. "You and your friends will never leave," he continued, his voice dripping with malice. "I will consume each of you, devour you whole, and bury you in the depths of my being." Its form curled, grew larger, and filled the cave with its grotesque presence. Shadows writhed around it like tendrils and stretched out towards me with claws that seemed to scratch the air. I felt an intense, crushing weight pressing down on my body. But then it disappeared with a single grin and dissolved like smoke into the void. It went still, thick and heavy. I took a trembling breath, clung to my rosary, and forced myself to concentrate so as not to lose my footing. Just as my thoughts settled, I saw them, Davis and Haynes, standing at the edge of a narrow precipice deeper in the tunnel, backs to me, faces down. They murmured softly and intently, as if they were speaking to something directly below them. "Davis," I called, stepping towards them, my voice echoing in the silence. He didn't answer. His eyes were empty, unfocused, staring into the pit below them. He held his rifle in one hand, the barrel tilted toward his jaw, his finger lightly on the trigger. Haynes stood beside him, clutching a knife, the blade pressed to his wrist, his hand shaking. I felt a wave of horror wash over me as I realized what they were about to do. "No!" I screamed, rushing forward, but they didn't seem to notice my presence, their faces contorted in silent agony. Their expression had given way to an unseen torment. "Mother," Davis whispered, his voice breaking as tears ran down his face. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I can't live with this anymore." Haynes, in a soft, distant voice, echoed his pain. "See you soon, Sam. I'll make it right. I'll make it right." "Stop!" I shouted in a desperate voice, reaching out to them. "You don't have to do this. Whatever you're seeing, it's not real. This place is lying to you." They hesitated, just for a moment, but the darkness around them seemed to throb in time with their desperation, drawing them back and feeding on their guilt and pain. "Davis, Haynes," I said, in a voice that was shaky but firm. "Listen to me. You are not alone. Whatever you see, whatever you hear, it is a lie. I am here. We will get through this together." For a brief, fragile moment they seemed to hesitate, their hands loosening, their weapons lowering. But the shadows deepened, as if the cave itself was watching, waiting, hungry for their surrender. Before I could stop him, Davis pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed deafeningly through the cave, echoing off the walls in a single, heartbreaking note that seemed to shudder through my entire being. I watched helplessly as he slumped forward, dropping his body onto the cold stone. His eyes glazed and distant, his lips parted in an expression of incomprehensible sorrow. The darkness around him seemed to writhe with satisfaction and fill up, as if absorbing his essence. Then, as his body relaxed, he plunged downward. "Davis," I whispered, but he was already dead. Haynes, now alone, trembling and dazed, pushed the blade against his wrist. He cut himself. Blood flowed immediately, collecting in dark rivulets on the stone, his face pale, his eyes wide open and without focus. He swayed and could hardly stay upright. "No!" I screamed, rushing to him and grabbing his wrist to stop the bleeding. My fingers slipped in the warm, slippery blood, and I struggled to hold on to him while he gasped for air and his gaze wavered between horror and confusion. "Haynes, stay with me," I urged, ripping open the emergency medical bag attached to his vest. I took out the tourniquet, quickly wrapped it around his arm, and tightened it until the bleeding slowed. This place lies to you and feeds on your fears. Don't let it win. Don't leave us. Haynes blinked, his face contorting in agony as he seemed to come back to himself. His breathing slowed, and his eyes met mine, clear but unsteady. "Father," he whispered, his voice quivering. I saw him. I saw my brother. He called to me." "This isn't real," I said, putting him at ease by placing a hand on his shoulder. "Whatever you're seeing, whatever you're feeling, it's this place trying to break you. Focus. We'll get out of here together." I began to mutter a prayer while holding my rosary in one hand and anchoring myself and Haynes in the only protection I knew. As I spoke, Haynes's breathing became calmer, his gaze sharper, and I could see the light of recognition returning to his eyes. He nodded weakly and grasped my hand as if clutching a lifeline. Thank you, Father," he whispered in a hoarse, broken voice. At that moment, a familiar voice echoed through the chamber and joined my prayer. I looked up in shock to see Mills step out of the darkness, his face aglow with a fierce, defiant faith that seemed to pierce the shadows around us. He murmured his own prayers, his lips moving in a steady, unyielding rhythm, as if each word were a weapon against the darkness. His eyes glowed with determination. "She told me to come here, Father." Haynes leaned heavily on my shoulder and Mills on my side. We turned and made our way up the winding path we had come. Every step felt like a struggle. The cave itself seemed to shift. The walls narrowed and closed. Dark tendrils of rock and earth crept inward, scratching our arms and shoulders and pushing us back with an almost living hostility. "Hurry," Mills urged, grabbing my arm and pulling me forward as the tunnel seemed to twist and contort, bending at unnatural angles. Haynes groaned, his face pale from blood loss, but he continued to move, leaning on Mills and me. I could feel his strength ebbing, but his steps remained sure. A low, guttural growl rose from the earth and echoed through the cave like the roar of a predator. The ground gave way beneath us and cracks spread along the path. The walls twisted and took on ghastly forms. Hands stretched out, mouths gaped, eyes stared with vicious blindness. "Keep praying," Haynes murmured, his voice shaking. "It hates that." With a surge of courage, I raised my voice and shouted the prayers I had once whispered, my voice echoing down the passageway and defying the cave's relentless grasp. Mills joined me, his voice strong and unwavering, and Haynes, though weak, whispered along, clinging to the words. "Deliver us, Lord, from every evil," I chanted as my heart pounded as we fought our way forward, each step a desperate race against the cave's grip. The tunnel seemed to lengthen, to expand, as if mocking our escape, but we pressed on, refusing to surrender to the hungry beast that surrounded us. The walls screamed with rage, a high-pitched, shrill sound that made me clench my teeth, but I held fast to my rosary and felt the warmth of my faith stabilize me and guide us along the winding path. At last, a sliver of light appeared ahead of us, faint but unmistakable. The cold, pure light of the outside world flooded into the tunnel and pierced the darkness. We mobilized our last reserves of strength and stumbled toward it, each step ripping us from the cave's grip until we lurched into the biting Antarctic air with a final jolt. I could feel Haynes sag at my shoulder as Mills supported him from the other side, as we struggled to put distance between us and this hellish place. The men were exhausted, their faces pale, their breaths shallow, but we were out. We had made it. Behind us, the cave entrance began to shake, the walls bending inward as if drawn by some unseen force. The shadows within twisted and writhed. giving one last violent shudder before the entire cavern collapsed inward, the rocks overlapping like the closing jaw of some monster. The ground shook and shook. A deep, echoing rumble shot through the ice and snow as the cave swallowed itself and disappeared into the earth. "Go!" I shouted, pushing Mills and Haynes further back as the earth shook and bucked beneath us, the land moving beneath our feet. We scrambled up a ridge, the snow sticking to our boots, the biting cold penetrating us. We barely made it to the top of the ridge before a strong quake shook the ground, a tremendous tremor that almost knocked us off our feet. Below, the ground where the cave had been began to sink. Snow and rocks plunged into the abyss as if pulled by an invisible hand. I watched in awe and horror as the earth closed over the spot, leaving nothing but an empty expanse of snow and jagged rock. The throbbing hum that had haunted us ceased and was replaced by the utter silence of the frozen wasteland. Mills held his head and his face was pale. God, it's like it was never there. Haynes, whose arm was still tightly bandaged with the tourniquet, nodded slowly and shivered. Just gone. We stood there, shivering with cold, as we realized the reality of what had just happened. The cave, the presence in it, everything was buried, hidden under the ice, as if nature itself had decided to seal this unspeakable horror. After a long, silent moment, I put a hand on Haynes's shoulder and nodded toward the distant lights of base camp. "Come on," I said softly. "Let's get you to a doctor." The walk back to the base was somber. Neither of us spoke, each lost in our own thoughts, our own memories of what had happened. I led the way, clinging to the faint light of my faith, feeling its warmth shelter me from the bitter wind that tugged at us, the cold more biting than ever. When we finally reached the base, Colonel Beckett was waiting for us, his face unreadable. He silently scanned each of us, his eyes lingering on Haynes's blood-soaked arm and the absent expression in Mill's eyes. Without saying a word, he motioned for the medics to take the two men with him, and I watched as they led Haynes and Mills away, their expressions drained. The colonel and I were left alone in the freezing night, his eyes sharp and searching as he turned to me. "Well?" he asked in a low, calm voice. "What happened down there?" I took a deep breath and struggled for the right words. How could I describe what we had seen and felt? How could I explain the cave that had almost swallowed us up, the unholy presence that had lingered in it? It was... I hesitated and finally looked him in the eye. "It was something evil, Colonel. Something beyond our understanding. I don't know what you expected, but whatever it was, it's better left buried." The colonel's jaw tensed, but he nodded slowly, his eyes unreadable. "And the sergeant?" "Davis didn't make it," I said softly, feeling the weight of those words on my shoulders. "But Mills and Haynes..." I paused and glanced back at the infirmary where they were being treated. "They'll recover, physically at least." He nodded again, his expression only softening a touch. "I'm sorry, Father, it wasn't... I didn't know it would turn out like that." "Neither did I," I replied, folding my hands, my fingers touching the rosary that still clung to my fingers. "But it's over now. Whatever was in that place is gone now." The colonel watched me for a moment, his eyes filling with the weight of questions he would never ask. He didn't believe in the supernatural, but even he could sense that we had faced something else. "Thank you," he finally said, and his voice sounded softer than ever. As I prepared to leave Antarctica, I felt a strange sense of peace mixed with sadness. The darkness in that cave had almost taken our lives, but we had survived. And as I boarded the plane, I whispered a final prayer. a plea that the evil that had lain beneath the ice would remain forever sealed, forgotten, hidden from the world. I would like to tell you all a little background story. I cannot reveal my name because I'm afraid that I might out myself to higher authorities who are trying to cover up what happened in Antarctica. I just want you to know that I was part of a research team that was sent to investigate a series of seismic disturbances that affected local wildlife in the Wilkes Land region of Antarctica. I was a miner who, together with my team of miners and seismologists who carried out excavations, was to find out exactly what caused these disturbances. I can't use their names either, but for the sake of simplicity, we'll call them Beck, Liam, and David. Beck had been my colleague for years, and we had become best friends. Liam and David were two seismologists from Stanford University who had been brought in for the expedition. The details of why we were selected are not really important. It was supposed to be a normal scientific expedition without any excitement, just another job I had to do to earn a considerable amount of money. The first indication that something was wrong was when my team and I noticed that 2 military Ospreys were docked to our transport as we were loaded onto the transport to Wilkes Land. They tell you why 2 platoons of soldiers are coming with us to dig through the ice? Beck asked, eyebrows raised. We've never been on an expedition this official. They might just be taking precautions, I assured him, even though I knew that wasn't the case. Something still felt weird. I still don't understand why a few earthquakes warrant military involvement. I don't like it, Beck said. You'll like it as soon as we get paid. 20 grand, man, you don't pass something like that up, I said. God, I was stupid. Once our team of 20 miners, Beck and I, and our 2 seismologists was assembled, we set off for Antarctica. The trip there was smoother than expected. Some of these men, who I had worked with for years, had never been so quiet. I could tell from looking at them that they felt something was wrong. I had no idea how cold it would be when we landed in Wilkes Land. Being used to the mines in Colorado, I was no stranger to very cold weather, but I wasn't prepared for this. We set up camp about a mile from where the disturbances were located. Liam and David set up the seismograph and waited for the activity. You know what just occurred to me, Beck said. Why do they need a mining crew for something like this? And the military? Why are we digging for earthquakes? None of it makes sense. Beck was right. None of it made sense. At that point, however, I didn't care. We were being paid $20,000 for this work. As I considered Beck's statement, I was interrupted by an unfamiliar voice calling my name. I looked up to see a man in battle gear with a rank insignia on his chest. Sorry, I just introduced myself. We were supposed to meet before takeoff, but we didn't have time. My name is Colonel Marcus Anton, and I'm in charge of this expedition, the man said. I paused for a moment and then asked him why the Army was accompanying us on an expedition to Earthquake Trench. His answer sent a shiver down my already freezing back. The seismic activity we're measuring is no ordinary earthquake. They're rhythmic. We have reason to believe that something or someone is under the ice causing the earthquakes. Your seismologist buddies are just here to confirm some of our suspicions. But we need you and your mining team to find out what the hell is under the ice, Anton explained. So the Army is here because what's under the ice might want to kill us. That's reassuring, Beck said, growing more and more suspicious of the expedition. It's just a precaution. Don't let our presence intimidate you. We're here to ensure your safety, Anton reassured him. Since it was getting late and the sun was setting, we decided to go to the center of the earthquakes the next morning and start the excavations from there. When we arrived at the site the next day, we were greeted by a colony of penguins standing in a circle in the middle of the earthquake center. They seemed to be pecking at the ground as if they were trying to uncover something under the ice. How much you want to bet they're aliens? I said to Beck, trying to calm him down. Beck just looked at me, his face even paler than usual. Don't joke around, man. You know how superstitious I am. Words have power, Beck said. We chased the penguins away and started setting up the dig site. Just as we were about to begin, we felt a low rumble in the ground. The ground pulsed at a steady pace and then stopped abruptly. David said that the seismograph showed wave patterns that matched exactly and were perfectly spaced. This only confirmed Anton's suspicion that there was something strange under the ice. We started digging right where the penguins had been, hoping to find the cause of these waves. 3 hours passed before one of our miners found something. About 6 meters below the ice was a large metallic pill-shaped object. I can't remember the exact dimensions, but it had to be about 6 to 9 meters long and 3 to 4 meters wide. When we hit the thing, we realized that it was hollow, or at least mostly so. The metal encasing the object was unlike any material I had ever seen. It was absolutely smooth, and none of our tools could make even the slightest scratch or dent in the thing. It was also incredibly shiny, and the chrome surface perfectly reflected our reflections. Anton ordered all miners to withdraw from the gap we had created. He said he wanted to supply the object with a power surge and see if they could time the wave emissions. Beck could no longer contain his panic. "Wait a minute. What are you doing, Colonel? This thing here is obviously alien, and you want to wake it up?" he said. "There's no need to worry. That's why we brought the armed forces here. We need to find out what this thing is," Anton explained. Then he called on 2 of his soldiers to load something out of the one Osprey they had brought to Ground Zero that looked like a generator. I was more confused than I had been during the entire trip. How did they know to bring that high-tech generator? How much was the colonel leaking? If they knew so much, why was a 20-man mining team from Colorado essential to the mission? My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of an electrical discharge. The seismic waves began again. "They energized the damn thing," Beck said. The rhythmic waves picked up speed. The ground shook harder now, and Beck and I struggled to maintain our balance. The waves increased tenfold in frequency, then suddenly stopped. In retrospect, I wish Beck and I had gotten a head start and run while we had the chance. The entire Antarctic was deathly silent for what felt like an eternity. It probably only lasted about 10 seconds. Then it happened. It's hard to describe, but I'll do my best to convey what the hell came out of that chasm. It was an arm. The arm was eerily human-like, but had 3 fingers and 2 elbow joints instead of 1. It was metallic in nature, but liquid. It's hard to describe, but imagine gallium being added to water and the metal turning to a liquid state. That's what the surface of the arm looked like. The surface of the arm was riddled with wires that were active and constantly contracting in strange patterns. The massive arm gripped the ground and clenched its 3-fingered hand. 3 more identical limbs shot out of the abyss, hoisting the monster out of its icy grave. It was huge. When it was fully emerged, this thing was almost 15 meters high. How it fit into its comparatively small capsule is a mystery to me. Its body consisted of what looked like a torso with an exposed rib cage, from which 12 wire-like appendages protruded. At the end of the extensions were red lights, which were probably its eyes. Each eye operated independently and scanned the area by moving in all directions. Beck and I were a considerable distance from the abyss, having been evacuated earlier. Anton was at the abyss with the soldiers when the generator was activated. Their efforts to fight the thing were useless. What it did to them still gives me nightmares. The whipping wires that covered the thing's legs seemed to expand at lightning speed. Each one targeted a different soldier and pierced them instantly. The beast didn't even have to move. It just stood there while its wires did the dirty work. Anton was the worst off. The thing seemed to focus particularly on wrapping 2 of its wires around Anton's waist and then ripping him in half. After slaughtering all the soldiers with ease, it went after the osprey and plugged itself into the osprey with its wires. Beck and I, half fleeing and half mesmerized by this thing, watched as it appeared to mess with the mechanics of the aircraft. Suddenly, the top of its torso opened. Something like a combination of a screech and a series of beeps came out of the opening. It was loud. Very loud. Beck dropped to his knees and covered his ears in pain. The cries were almost rhythmic, like the seismic waves it created underground. I hoisted Beck onto my shoulder and ran in the direction of our transport, hoping we could outrun the thing. I looked back and saw the monster raise one of its slender legs into the air. I was confused for a moment, until it lowered its leg onto the icy tundra, sending a shockwave of massive proportions through the ground. Beck and I were caught in the ensuing wave. The last thing I remember was a wave of ice and snow, and then total darkness. When I woke up, I was in an unfamiliar hospital room. An older man in a suit was waiting in a chair by my bed. "You're damn lucky to be alive. You and one of the seismologists are the only survivors," the man said. "But Beck, he was just with me, where—" I was interrupted by the man. "Your friend's body was recovered a few meters from where we found you." "He didn't make it, I'm sorry," the man said. "How did you find me?" I asked. "The seismologist who survived made it to your transport and told the pilot to call for backup. We found you half a mile from the transport," he said. "Do you know what that thing was? Why we were sent to dig it up?" I asked. "We'll explain everything to you when you've recovered. Until then, get some rest." I eventually learned that what we had uncovered was an alien-origin biomechanical weapon. They now call it the Shock Strider, in reference to its varied abilities which revolve around seismic waves. The military finally managed to bring it down 5 miles from where it had emerged, using 5 MOP 2 bunker buster bombs. I would have been reassured by this if I hadn't learned one last disturbing fact. When the Shock Strider had grabbed the Osprey with its cables, it hacked into its communication systems. We don't know how, but the thing managed to send several frequencies with the shrill noise it produced into space. Look at the life you live and make the most of it while you still can. The thing we dug up in Antarctica knew it couldn't inhabit this planet alone, so it called for more of its kind to help it. There isn't much time left. There are more of those things out there, and they're coming. I never would have thought that my insatiable curiosity would drive me to the brink of madness. And yet here I am, only a shadow of my former self, haunted by the horrors I encountered on this ill-fated journey into the frozen expanse of Antarctica. My name is Dr. Arthur Howland. I am a marine biologist, and I am passionate about the unexplored depths of the world's oceans. In 2022, I received an invitation to join a privately funded expedition to study the mysterious life forms that live under the Antarctic ice. My sponsors were secretive and reluctant to share details, but the prospect of untold riches was too tempting to resist. I should have seen it coming. We set sail from Ushuaia, Argentina, a ragtag crew of scientists and sailors united by a shared desire to explore the unknown. Our ship, the SS Morpheus, was an aging icebreaker with a dark aura that seemed to resonate with the eerie stories of lost explorers and forgotten civilizations. As we headed south, we were accompanied by the deafening silence of the wide, empty sea. The first sign of our impending doom came when we reached the icy shores of the continent. We disembarked and set up camp, quickly realizing that the biting cold was the least of our worries. The air was filled with a palpable sense of dread. as if the ice itself was warning us to turn back. Undeterred, we pressed on, drilling into the frozen depths to retrieve samples of the alien ecosystem below. The creatures we discovered were unlike any life form I had ever encountered. They were twisted amalgams of tentacles, claws, and eyes, seemingly cobbled together by a demented cosmic architect. These abominations exuded a malevolent aura that triggered unease deep within me. As days turned into weeks, our morale began to wane. The sun never rose above the horizon, leaving us in a perpetual twilight that gnawed at our sanity. We were plagued by vivid nightmares and hallucinations, the darkness whispering forbidden secrets in our ears. Our camp was permeated with an atmosphere of decay and despair, and death seemed to hover over us like a pall. One by one, my colleagues succumbed to madness. Some wandered into the frozen wasteland and were never seen again. Others simply ceased to exist, their bodies twisted into grotesque forms by the unnatural forces lurking beneath the ice. The apex of our horror came when we discovered the ancient structure hidden beneath the ice. It was an impossible edifice of cyclopean scale, constructed of a dark, otherworldly material that defied logic. The architecture was both repulsive and fascinating, and the air around it was thick with an evil that crushed our spirits. As we explored the eerie labyrinth, we encountered unspeakable horrors that tore at the very fabric of our being. We found the remains of a long-dead civilization, its twisted forms trapped in eternal agony. We encountered monstrous beings that bled shadow and feasted on our terror. And at the heart of it all, a yawning abyss, an infinite void that beckoned us to embrace oblivion. There, at the edge of the abyss, I lost the last vestige of my humanity. I saw the truth of the universe, a cold, indifferent expanse filled with suffering and despair. I saw the futility of our existence, an insignificant speck in the face of eternal darkness. Somehow, I managed to escape from that cursed place and return to the surface. The few remaining members of the expedition followed me, each of them a broken fragment of his former self. We abandoned our camp and fled north, driven by the primal instinct to escape the horrors lurking beneath the ice. Our return journey was a nightmare in itself. The SS Morpheus seemed to have absorbed the malevolence of that accursed land, its dark corridors teeming with unseen terrors that stalked us day and night. Our minds were plagued by the memories of what we had seen, and we could not escape the gnawing emptiness that consumed our souls. Against all odds, we reached the safety of civilization, forever changed by our journey into the heart of darkness. The remaining crew disbanded, each seeking solace in the comforting embrace of the dark. We swore never to speak of our experiences, lest the taint of this forbidden knowledge spread further into our fragile world. As for me, I am forever haunted by the nightmares that pursued me from the abyss. The things I saw in that forsaken place have made me a broken man, unable to find solace in the mundane comforts of life. I know I am forever tainted, and that the darkness will come for me one day. I do not tell my story as a warning, for there are others who will undoubtedly be lured by the promise of untold knowledge and the thrill of the unknown. I tell my story as a testament to the fragility of the human spirit and the unfathomable horrors that lurk beneath the Antarctic ice. May those who heed my words find comfort in the knowledge that there are some secrets better left uninvestigated, and some doors never to be opened. H.P. Lovecraft was right after all.